It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. Good to have you in studio today, and we're going to talk about a subject you want to pay attention to because it's actually, I found a lot of confusion out there. It's called bath salts, and it's a synthetic drug, and a lot of people think it's just bath salts that you'd go to the store and buy over the counter, which actually this form of bath salts you can go to the store and buy over the counter as well. But it's not something you put in your bathtub to make the water smell good or to get that smooth feeling in the water. Ivan Anderson's our guest in studio today. He's becoming our drug expert. You're a speaker for Matt Vors.
Yes.
Welcome back. I'm trying to remember, did we have you in late last year or early this year to talk about Spice, the synthetic marijuana?
You know, I don't recall when it was. I know last time I was here we were talking about prescription drugs. So.
Was it prescription drugs?
With the panel. With
the panel, okay, right, okay. And then we had Spice earlier this year, which had just become illegal, and you brought some of that in, and we talked about Spice and the different forms that comes in. And lo and behold, now we have a new one.
Yep.
Spice was made illegal. You can't sell it in the state of Arizona anymore. You can't buy it in the state of Arizona anymore. At least you're not supposed to be able to. And now we got this new thing called bath salts out. And just, I'd say, Ivan, just recently, over the last couple of weeks now, in August, we had man admits to injecting bath salts prior to running into tree. This was in Prescott. He's a 35-year-old male out of Prescott. Then we had, this was just last week, mayor woman admits to injecting bath salts before driving. And she was pulled over on a traffic stop, and she admitted that she had bath salts, and they found syringes and things like that, and baggies with bath salt residue. Ivan, what is bath salts? Because it's not bath salts.
Bath salts is basically a synthetic, man-made drug, and it's been out now probably since, I'll show this again in a minute, but it's been out since, I've been reading about it since probably early of 2010.
Okay.
And it was starting to make a pretty large dent as far as a lot of ER visits by patients in the southeast, like in Louisiana, kind of like something like it started around that area.
Okay.
And then from there, it just has gone across the U.S. But as of 2011, the ER visits they're seeing with, from pre-hospital with fire department and paramedics and police and that kind of thing, it's probably 10 times the amount, and the year isn't even over. So, I mean, it's the amount they're seeing is just gone through the roof as far as people going to the hospital. But bath salts basically is it's a chemical, and it's called.
You're going to be looking at your notes quite a bit because we don't know a whole lot about this, do we?
Not really.
No, not really. Okay.
Like I said, it's man-made. Somebody apparently got this combination and put it together and has been selling it. And the two main chemicals that are in it, one is called methadone, and it's a stimulant, and apparently you can overdose on that one. And the other one is called, I'm going to try and say this without in one sentence here.
Better you than me.
Methylene dioxypyrovalerone.
Okay.
So it's about that long. It's called MDPV for short.
Okay.
And it's a synthetic drug also, or chemical. And those are the two main ingredients they use for bath salts. And of course, the bath salts themselves come in a powder form. They look like this. I bought this here in Old Town, and this is half a gram, and it looks like anything else you'd ever see like that with cocaine or heroin or meth or whatever, but it's
exactly what it looks like.
Yeah.
Just like when you brought the Spice here and we dumped it on the counter, it looks like, grated up marijuana. So now we've got this bath salts thing. So you said you purchased it locally.
Yeah.
So it's sold in stores.
Yep. This was what I bought. This is half a gram right here. This is just one brand. There's, from what I've read, from what I got from Monica Officer Colt at Cottonwood Police, there's probably 40 different names for the stuff. Some of them are like Ivory Wave, Bolivian Bath, Red Dove, Vanilla Sky, Drone, but they've got tons of different names. I didn't see any of those at the store I bought this at. This is the one that I saw. They're called 8 Balls, which obviously is a reference to drugs.
But do they all say bath salts on them?
Yes.
They all do say bath salts. So maybe the name brand itself at the top is different, but it all does say bath salts. And what I think is really interesting, and what no one's paying attention to, is at the very bottom, what does it say on that package?
Not meant for human consumption.
I think the Spice said that too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now that's the whole marketing gimmick of this stuff, is that they're selling this poison to people to alter their consciousness or whatever you want to call it, and it's purely for one reason. You're not selling this stuff for use in your bath, obviously. This is strictly to be used to get high.
Now, that's the first time you brought this package in, but I've gone online and typed in bath salts, and it usually shows me this, I want to say almost like a Carmex container, that the Carmex lip balm container, and it's in something like that. Did you see those in the store as well?
I didn't, not in this particular store.
It was just the package like this, okay.
You know,
I just want parents and people to realize that it does come in different containers as well. It's not just the package with the little vial inside.
Yeah, this is just a package. This is not the standard for what you're going to see out there. You're going to see it in everything out there.
What are the effects?
They are pretty extreme. I was reading on the internet, you know, different people talking about their use and how they felt when they got done using it and that kind of thing. And some of them are pretty mild, and you know, it's a stimulant. The main ingredients in it are a stimulant, and so they're going to give you that, you know, higher heart rate, the sweating, the, you know, increased temperature, blood pressure, and all that stuff. But what they're not telling you, or what you're not reading about, are the folks that are going to the ERs who, well, they call it extreme agitation, is what they call it, and that's a pretty mild description.
I call it out of control.
Pretty much.
Okay.
You go from being somewhat normal to being wired. You know, you started it, and you know, all the effects are kicking in, and so you're pretty wired. You're having the effects. I believe you hallucinate some with it, but then you get to the point where you're out of control. You become violent. I've talked to nurses from VVMC who were talking about patients they've had that came in who they actually brought them in who had said they had taken some bath salts and were feeling the effects and didn't like them, wanted to get care or whatever, and went from walking into the ER and being a patient you could deal with to being violent. And where they had to basically inject these patients with enough medication to put them in a coma and then intubate them, which means putting the tube down their throat into their lungs and breathing for them so they could just keep them sedated so they would just let the effects wear off. Of course, the effects of these drugs can last anywhere from, you know, hours to days.
Days.
And we're talking about, I actually read one from an ER, I'm not sure what state it was in, but the patient had the effects of their bath salts for 12 days. Oh. And so they would take away the meds, let him come out of his coma, and he'd go right back to the same exact behavior that he'd had when he was sedated because he was so violent. Now, what I've seen and talked to different doctors and stuff, and one of the trainings I've been to with FMC and VVMC, which is, you know, Verde Valley Medical Center and Flagstaff Medical Center, we're seeing averages of 3 and 4 days, to where these patients wake up, they're still under the influence of these drugs, the exact same influence, whether it's hallucinating, you know, extreme agitation or whatever you want to call it, but the effects don't go away, and nothing they can be given is going to change the effects. It's just a matter of letting it wear off. So,
now you mentioned that it'll last for days, and I'm trying to. It was either early August or late July, and I told you before the show. As I tell you, Prescott Police gave me a story. Lieutenant Andy Reinhardt. They responded to a house from a 911 call from a woman who said, "I'm hallucinating on bath salts. It's been 3 days. I can't stop. Come and take this stuff away from me." Now, I don't know if she was continuing to do it while she was hallucinating, but it got to the point where she was scaring herself, and she had the police come to remove the drugs and get them away from her. So it obviously does last for a long time. Now, you're a paramedic and a firefighter locally. Have you had any contact with this personally?
No, I haven't.
No.
Our agency has.
Okay.
We had, probably 3 weeks ago, we had a call at the Cottonwood station, and one of our medics took a guy in who was having a bad trip, basically. He'd been on it and couldn't get off of it and was not acting appropriately, and people he was around, I guess, called 911. I'm not sure the exact details, but he was on bath salts, and you know, he couldn't come down from the high, and so they took him into the ER, and if they admitted him, they probably sedated him and intubated him. They said they've had, in the last 3 months, VVMC has had about 15 patients that were under the influence of the bath salts, majority of which were intubated. And that's a big deal. You don't intubate a patient who, you know, this guy walks in, is under the influence of drugs. That is not a normal thing to intubate them. Sure. Normally, you give them some Valium or Versed or something heavier than that the hospital has to just put them down, or at least help take the edge off.
The high.
It just takes the edge off of it, really. You can't, even with cocaine users, they'll give them Valium and that kind of thing. It's just to kind of bring them down, but it doesn't take off it doesn't stop the effects, doesn't reverse the effects. It just kind of mellows you out a little bit. But these bath salts are so extreme that they have to just completely intubate them and put them in a self-induced coma, or a coma, medically induced coma. So it's a very the effects are very extreme, and it's basically poison. You're poisoning your brain at that point, is what you're doing.
Let's take a break. Ivan Anderson, speaker for Matt Forrest, also local firefighter and paramedic. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. We're talking about bath salts today.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The best songs ever made. Oldies Radio KKLD.
I see the moon rising.
The greatest hits from the 60s and 70s. KKLD.
95.9 KKLD The Cloud, playing the music you sing along to.
Northern Arizona's KKLD, the songs you love. Raising a child means working with partners, people you can rely on for expertise, advice, and support. But when drugs or drinking enter the picture, who do you turn to? Well, there's help for that too. The partnership at drugfree.org. You're not alone.
Fire can happen at any time. What would you try to save?
My family photos.
My grandfather's war memorabilia.
My dogs.
I'm firefighter Brandon Wacker with the Cotton Fire Department. A working smoke detector is your best defense in the event of a fire. Make sure you have a smoke detector in every room except your kitchen. Test them monthly and change the battery once a year. Take the time to save the things you can't replace.
Sunny 100, your at-work radio station.
You're every word, you're everything.
With Malone in the morning, John Tesh in the evening, and the best variety of music all day long.
Waiting on the world to check.
Online at myradioplace.com.
And big girls don't cry.
Sunny 100, 100.1 FM.
Welcome back to Countywide. We're talking bath salts today with Ivan Anderson. He is a speaker for Matt Forrest. And while I mentioned that, if a group wants you to come and talk to their group about bath salts, spice, meth, any of those things, you can do that, correct?
Right.
What's the best way to get a hold of you? And we'll do this again at the end of the show, too.
You can just call my cell phone, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's that number?
It's 254-9220.
Okay. All right. Bath salts. Is there an age limit to purchasing this?
It's a good question. I would imagine it's probably 18, but I don't honestly know.
Oh, was there no sign or no idea?
I don't recall seeing one.
Okay.
It was in a smoke shop, which is where you'd find, or a head shop. So I don't think you can be under 18 to buy anything. You can't buy cigarettes if you're under 18 or whatever. So I'm guessing that you got to be 18 to even go in there anyway. Does that guy actually check ID? That's a great question. So
good question. I don't know. So anyways.
I mean, when you're selling this stuff and you know what it does, I think your moral compass is pretty much hammered, so I don't think you really care. Now, of course, he doesn't want to get his license taken to have a business, so he probably wouldn't make a habit out of selling it to teenagers, but I'm not going to speak for him. So.
I thought about that too. It's like, you know what it really does. Why would you sell it? But
it's all about the dollar.
It's all about the dollar. That's so true. You spent $15 on this little tiny vial right here that I'm holding in my hand. $15. Okay, so that's
half a gram.
It's pretty inexpensive.
Oh yeah.
You know,
and for $30 you get twice that. And I honestly don't know how much you would want to use. I mean, I would assume that as soon as you open that, you're just going to snort the whole thing. But
I was going to ask you, do we know how much of this vial, this one vial that you have, that you'd use at a time? I mean, when they say, well, like I told you the stories about two people at least have admitted to injecting them. Would you use the whole vial at once, or half of it, or?
It's each individual user. It's just personal preference. It's like
Depends
a
on how
bottle
you-
of Jack Daniels. You're going to drink the whole thing in one setting, or are you going to just drink a little bit and make it last a while? So, you know, it depends on the high you got. Say you've never used it before, so you just use a portion of the vial, and that's the effect you get. So next time you use it, after you let the effects wear off in 4 or 5 days, you use the entire vial and see what happens to you. So.
Now, we've talked about injecting it. Is there other ways to have this work on you?
The usual routes. You can either snort it, you can smoke it, you can put it in your veins, you can put it in a liquid and drink it. You can just pop it in your mouth. The usual routes.
All right. Well, how long was spice around before we had legislation that came in and kind of?
I want to say it was probably close to 2 years, if not longer.
2 years.
It seemed like it kind of got slow. It was a slow ball rolling on that one. But spice is a good example of what's going on nowadays with drugs. I mean, spice is a man-made drug. And all it was some chemicals that were just synthetic forms of cannabinoids found in pot. And so they actually mimicked those. They put them out in the market and sold them as fake pot, which they really weren't, but that's what they sold them as. You know, the legislation caught up with it, made those particular drugs illegal for being sold for that particular thing, and now we're on to something else. They even have fake spice now, which they call, I know one of the names they call is potpourri, and all they're doing is taking some chemicals and they're removing like one hydrogen, which alters this chemical, and so now they're going to use that chemical for the same reason that they were selling the spice, to get that alternate high. It's tough to find on urine tests, and it's fake pot.
So it's not spice anymore, but it's a derivative of spice.
Exactly.
And it's just a small change. So obviously the legislation, there's got to be a different way to word this stuff to be able to make these things illegal. Because if you can just go in there and take this number out of the equation and then still have the same effect.
Basically, it's just a man-made chemical that will alter your your reality, I guess. For
reality in life, yeah.
It'll make you high. And spices, or excuse me, bath salts is the same thing. Bath salts, man-made. They took these particular chemicals and they combined them with whatever else, and they put it out there, and this is the effects you get. And until, well, currently, like 32 states, like I said earlier, have outlawed these chemicals in this form to be sold. They'll sell it probably, my guess, we talked about it earlier, I would imagine within 18 months, it'll be illegal in this state and probably illegal in probably almost all 50 states. And then we'll end up onto the next drug, the next designer drug that's out there.
What are the difference in the manufacturers? Who's manufacturing this? Are we talking one company that's manufacturing this? Or are we talking about dozens of companies manufacturing it? And then now let me ask you this question too. If we know what it really does, who says you can put it in a package and then sell it?
That's a great question. As far as who's selling this stuff, like everybody else, I went on the internet and looked it up.
Yeah.
And all I could find was the sources from a lot of this appears to be from China and India, and that's about as narrowed down as I could get it.
It still has to be shipped into the U.S., and somebody still has to sign off on that crate that's arriving.
Yeah.
If we know what it is and we know what it does, why don't we just not allow it in?
I think we're heading to that direction, but again, you know,
we've been trying that with all kinds of drugs too.
It's just a matter of catching up. The legislation has to catch up to the drugs that are out there currently.
They're moving fast. So, and then before the show started, we talked about the fact that, you know, whoever developed this, bath salts, whoever invented spice, you know, they were already working on whatever's going to come next, because, you know, once legislation does catch up and we catch up to what's going on, we outlaw that, and then they can just throw the next product out. And you mentioned it's called potpourri now. I think spice was labeled as an incense, wasn't it?
Yeah.
An incense. And it said right at the bottom, not for human consumption. All right.
So, I mean, just these minor little things, we're letting them get in here and sell it. And again, we'll find out what they've got in the future. Something else is coming, I'm sure.
We got to take another break. Ivan Anderson in the studio today. He's a speaker from Matt Forrest. If you need him to come and talk with you, go to the Matt Forrest website, mattforrest.org, and it's got information about the speakers and who can come to your group and talk about these things that, for me, they are starting to get a little confusing because they do change so quick. This is Countywide. I'm Paul David. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
York, New York.
Your home for America's best music.
KYBZ.
AM 1600.
You may not know where to turn when you're struggling with a drug or alcohol problem. It can be completely overwhelming. Even if you are not the one who's using. If you're a parent looking for help, look to the partnership at drugfree.org. You're not alone.
Having a fire escape plan is very important to keep your family safe and together in the event of a fire. When you awake to the sound of a smoke detector and smoke in your room, don't stand straight up. Carefully roll off your bed and stay low under the smoke. If your door is shut, feel the door with the back of your hand. Slowly open the door if no heat is felt. Always stay low until you get to the outside of your home. Always have 2 ways out of your house and a specified meeting place somewhere outside your home. Home escape plans should be drawn up and rehearsed on a regular basis. This could be the difference between life and death if caught in a fire.
Sunny 100, your at-work radio station.
You're every word, you're everything.
With Malone in the morning, John Tesh in the evening, and the best variety of music all day long.
Waiting on the world to check.
Online at myradioplace.com.
And big girls don't cry.
Sunny 100, 100.1 FM.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a couple minutes left in the program, and as we've talked about during the show, there's been a lot of confusion about the bath salts, and I remember when spice came out, there was confusion about that. I'm sure there was when methamphetamine came on the scene, and cocaine, and all these drugs. When they come out, it's brand new, and you've got all the people that want to try them out, and then you've got all the people who are kind of surprised to hear that it didn't even exist. And the bath salts one was one that I was kind of surprised. I thought, well, why would you name it bath salts? That's not even an attractive drug name. You know, but then I realized, okay, it's got the 8-ball sign up there, so that probably makes it cool. You do speaking for MadForce. You go around. Tell me a little bit about that. We've got a minute.
Okay. I've been speaking with MadForce for about a little over 3 years. My whole goal is just education. I focus on teens. I go to all the different schools in the Valley. I talk to probationers, and I talk to private schools. I go wherever I can. I probably talked to in the last 3 years, over 2,000 kids. Whether it be in the Yavapai, in Prescott side or on the Verde Valley side. I go wherever. I basically do all the contact. I don't charge for it. I go there. I have a PowerPoint presentation that talks. I start out with cigarettes and go to pot and get into, right now, prescription drugs, spice and bath salts, and then alcohol. We were talking about meth quite a bit, but that has it's not out of the news, but it's not real prevalent in the schools, and so
not as bad as it used to be.
I don't spend a lot of time on meth with the kids, or coke, or heroin, or whatever. But I focus on what's current and what's popular and what we're seeing with young people. Mm-hmm. And 13 is my target age because that's the target age that we're seeing in the state and in the nation for kids trying stuff, whether it's smoking, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex. 13, everybody starts to really peek up and try things out. So
time to experiment, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in again this year.
My pleasure.
Chatting with us, and I think you're going to be our go-to guy when we have stuff like this come up on the scene because you can talk about it. So it's good to have you in, Ivan. Thanks.
My pleasure.
All right, that's today's Countywide. I'm Paul David. We'll talk to you again next week.
This has been Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday as we tackle the hot topics and talk to the decision makers across Yavapai County. That's Countywide with Brad Miller and Paul David each Tuesday and Thursday on this Yavapai Broadcasting station.